Welcome to session 2 of the Sharing Jesus course. Last session we looked at the 5 big things to remember when putting your faith into words. We also looked at our top tips in starting God conversations. We set you a challenge to start a God conversation with somebody. And how did you get on? Spend some time sharing stories about how you got on starting a God conversation.
We hope you got on okay with that first challenge. In this session, we're going to look at how we articulate the Christian faith. So when somebody asks us, so what is the Christian faith really all about? What do we say? See, I believe that Jesus is as relevant today as he always has been. But that culture has changed massively. The world is a very different place. And how we articulate the Christian faith is really important. The words that we use. 50 years ago in the UK, many had been to Sunday school. They understood the Christian stories. They understood Christian words and language, things like sin and redemption. They understood what those words meant. And they also had some felt needs. They needed to be forgiven. They understood that need. But in today's world, we live in a very different place. People haven't grown up with the whole Sunday school experience. Many young people today have no idea of any of the Christian stories. Even the story of Jesus being born in a stable isn't a known story amongst many young people. They don't understand Christian jargon. They don't understand words like sin and redemption. They also don't have the same felt needs in some ways. Many young people have been told that whatever they want to do with their life is okay. They don't understand this need for forgiveness that a previous generation really connected with. It's important that as we share the Christian faith, we make sure that Jesus remains relevant for each and every person that we're speaking to. So today, we want to look at some really practical models in how we can share our faith.
Over the years, a number of different models have been used to help us explain and articulate the gospel. About 50 years ago, the Bridge to Life came out. It explained that man was on one side of a cliff, God was on the other side of the cliff. If man ever wanted to get to God, he couldn't because there was no way across the chasm. Jesus and the cross is that bridge. For man to get to God, the only way is through Jesus. It's a great model. It's all about grace. None of the works on what man can do will ever enable him to get to God. But it's also very simplistic. There's no mention of church. It's very individualistic. Jesus is simply a bridge on the cross. There's no lordship, there's no resurrection, there's no new life. What about the Holy Spirit? There are great different models that we would like to explore with you today to see which one resonates well with you and with the people that you're talking to, so you can start to explain the gospel well.
The first model we want to really look at is the model of story. So we live in this massive unfolding story through history. The technical term is the meta-narrative, the big story. Now it begins not with sin, but it begins with God creating everything good. It is good, it is good, it is good. Then he creates man and woman, and it is very good. But then, man and woman rebel against God. Sin enters the world, and there are the consequences of sin that impact the entirety of creation. But then God has a rescue plan, as he sends Jesus to be born into this broken world, to show us how to live. His death, his resurrection, and the sending of the Holy Spirit begins a whole new chapter. This is where we find ourselves today in the story, that God is working in and through us to bring about his redemptive purposes, that he is victorious, and that one day there'll be a new heaven and a new earth. This is the big story in which we find ourselves. And people are always engaged in stories. People love to hear good stories. It's important to work out how this big story can link in with our own story, but also with other people's stories. Roy Crowne's put together this great little model that looks at my story, their story, and God's story, and how the three overlap and interlink. It's really important we learn how to share our story. When we've heard somebody else's story, we have permission to share something of our story. When we're sharing our story, some really important things. First of all, we mustn't use jargon. Secondly, it's important to mention Jesus rather than God, so it makes it specifically about the Christian faith. Thirdly, it's important not to embellish your story, but to tell it how it really is, about this continual thing that God is doing in and through your life. Joe and I love something called the Matchstick Challenge. We try and share our story before the match burns out. And Joe is now going to demonstrate this for us.
So the challenge is to say your testimony before you burn your fingers off. Top tip, if you have a long testimony, use a longer match. Okay, so I was 19. I met a group of Christians who all lived very ordinary lives, but lives that I was jealous of. They talked about something I'd never heard of. They talked about having a relationship with God. I didn't know what that was, but I knew I wanted it. So I prayed and I met God miraculously and powerfully, and my life has never been the same since. It's an adventure and one I would never, ever swap.
Good job. It's really important when sharing your story to keep it short. Allow people to ask you questions to develop certain aspects of your story, but don't feel you have to give the entire thing in one go. Keep it short and keep it to the point.
Our second model looks at sin. Sin is a heavy word. It's not a very popular word. It's a word that lots of people don't understand, don't use, or feel quite threatened by. Sin is the second part of our story. It's our problem. Very simply, we look at the world around us and we know it isn't right. There is something wrong with the fact that people can hurt people, that our environment is struggling, that our economies are broken, that the systems that we live under are flawed and corrupted. Sin is our problem. We know it's our problem because whether you know the Christian story or not, we look at these things and say, something is not right. This is not as it should be. And that feeling, that sense, is the key point to open up a conversation about the gospel. Because you're right, things shouldn't be like this. Things were designed and meant to be very, very different. But because of sin, our whole world is broken out of kilter. So, in your groups, our next discussion, how would you explain the term sin to somebody who isn't a Christian? So, in your discussions, some of the words that you may have used: corruption, you may have used problem, you may have used wrongdoing, falling short of the mark. Whatever it is that turns our world out of kilter and out of sync with God's purposes is sin. And the thing about sin is it permeates everything. Krish Kandiah talks about the 4 broken relationships because of the effect of sin on our world.
The first broken relationship is with God. It's the upward relationship. God is holy and pure and perfect, and yet because of the brokenness in the world, the sin, the corruption in the world, we have a broken relationship with Him. We also have a broken relationship with ourselves, that as we look in the mirror, we fail to see who we really are, our true identity. We were made in God's image with meaning and purpose. Thirdly, there's a broken relationship with other people, culturally, with our community, with different nations. Even in our families, there are broken relationships because sin has entered the picture. And fourthly, there's a broken relationship with creation itself. We've mistreated and mismanaged something which God has given us to oversee. These broken relationships, argues Krish, are fixed when we discover Christ's death and his resurrection, and what that means for our lives. And as we discover that relationship with God, these other relationships begin to sort themselves out. We begin to see who we really are as we look in the mirror, that we are loved by God. We begin to have restoration in relationships. The gospel is a gospel of reconciliation with other people as well as with God. And fourthly, we begin to understand our role with how we are called to look after and care for creation.
And remember, all of these relationships are restored and put right through the person of Jesus. He shows us how to relate to God, he shows us how to understand ourselves and other people, and he shows us how he is making everything new. Jesus is the heart of this story.
Which actually brings us really nicely onto our third model, which is actually how we share who the person of Jesus really is. You see, we often call people to follow Jesus, but people have no idea who he is or what he stands for. I think it's really important to share about the incarnation, his life, his death, and his resurrection. One of the things I love showing people is when my daughter's first baby grows. It's so small, she's so big now, it's amazing looking back at how small she once was. And to think that God became flesh, that he entered human history as a baby, blows my mind. The way he lived, the things that he taught, the miracles he performed. I believe the person of Jesus is fascinating. And then his death on the cross and his resurrection. And how those disciples who were so fearful suddenly had this audacity to share and communicate the Christian faith because of what they have witnessed. I believe the person of Jesus is a fascinating story that we must share and connect with. One of the most basic ways in which we can do this is by telling the stories of Jesus. A whole generation has no idea about these stories, and we have the opportunity to tell these stories afresh. The next challenge for you guys to do is this. I'd love you to try and think about your favourite stories about Jesus from the Gospels, and to take it in turns to tell those stories to each other. So now, in your groups, have a go at doing that. See, what's amazing about these stories is that you haven't got to open your Bible. You can just tell the stories in your own words. Now, often as we speak these stories in our own words, they come without any baggage, any linguistic baggage. The words become very natural. And often these stories communicate a real depth of what the gospel is all about. I'm going to ask Jo now to share her favourite story about Jesus.
So my favourite story of Jesus is the story of the woman who was caught in adultery. We hear about the fact that the woman is caught and she's brought before Jesus by the city leaders. She's flung at his feet as the crowd of men gather around her. And Jesus is asked, what shall we do with her? He tells the people, those who are without sin can throw the first stone. You see, what her punishment should be is being stoned to death. That is what she's expecting. She's crouched in the ground, waiting to be judged. This is a woman at the depths of despair. She knows she's done wrong. She knows she's screwed up. And Jesus is right there next to her. She starts to look at him. And where her eyes are full of despair and shame and guilt, his eyes are full of hope. So while she is waiting for the sound of a stone being picked up from the ground, no one picks up a stone. and step by step, everyone walks away. Jesus and the woman are the only two left. Jesus lifts her up and says, "Who is here to judge you?" "No one," she says, "and I will not judge you either." Jesus offers her a new life and a fresh start. It is a beautiful story of Jesus' hope and insight into our lives.
That story Joe just shared is a story all about no matter what we've done in our past, we can know Jesus in the present. That he wants not to judge us, but to welcome us, as to turn away and to transform and change our lives as we enter a relationship with him. Stories about Jesus are powerful. Think about which ones you might use in the future. And perhaps next time somebody says, "What's this whole Christian faith thing about?" you might say, "Well, can I just share one of my favourite stories about Jesus?"
Lots of these models talk about life before encountering Jesus. But what about our lives after Jesus? The gospel, the good news about Jesus, is that a new life is possible in and through him. When you're sharing your story, talk about the effect that Jesus has on your life today. What is good about being a Christian? What is different about your life now you know Jesus? What is different about the way you view the world, the way you make choices, the way you work, the way you choose what jobs to have, the way you pay your bills, the way you treat your neighbours? What is this new life, this kingdom life that you have? Start to break it down. Look at what your life has been transformed in and share the good news of Jesus in your life today.
So as we look at this next section, this final model, what we're going to do in your groups again is look at this. What are the 3 best things about being a Christian? But also ask yourselves, what is one of the hardest things about being a Christian as well? Being a Christian is not all easy. There are difficult things in following Jesus. So ask, what are the 3 best things and what are the hardest things? I hope you found that exercise useful. I think it's often important to remember some of the great things that it is being a Christian, that when somebody asks us, what is the Christian faith all about, we can share something from our own personal experience. It might have been things like freedom, a real sense of being free from the past, free to know who God is. It might be issues around identity, that our identity is not in what we do or what we have, but in who God says that we are. It could be things about the church, about being in community, that by being a Christian we have this whole new community to be a part of. But also there are the difficult things too. Let's be honest, as we share the Christian faith, let's speak about what this thing really is all about, that they can choose to follow Jesus for themselves and enter a relationship with him. We're going to hear again now from Roy Crowne, the Director of Hope, as he shares some of his thoughts on how churches have been able to share the Christian message faithfully in their communities.
The Church of Jesus Christ is an amazingly diverse church. You've got every culture, every context. And some churches do this really well. Some churches struggle with it. But we do have a commitment to communicate the gospel. But the key thing in communicating the gospel is knowing the right narrative, is knowing the right story, is knowing the right illustration. The critical thing is we've got to go back to the core of what the gospel is. And the core of what the gospel is in essence Jesus. So how do you present the Jesus story? 46% of people in our culture, according to research, don't even believe Jesus was a real person. So we've got some work to do in presenting the gospel, but the gospel is all around the Jesus story. The Jesus story, for many people, is so brand new. The big issue for the church is, can I believe you? Can I trust you? And if I can trust you by the love that I've seen, then the language that I use to communicate the story is key to understanding that. And in the Jesus story, what you can work out is, why did Jesus talk about the leaven in the bread? Why did he talk about the birds of the air? Why did he talk about taxes? Because this is what people knew about. This is what ordinary people, this was their world. He used what people knew about, and then he built a bridge to the gospel context. And then what he would do, he would build credibility from their world to the new world of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I think what we've got to do well in presenting the gospel is build with our audience trust, credibility, believability, and then allow the gospel to do its work. So the way we present the gospel is as diverse as the culture that we live in. I don't really care what method you use. Could be the arts, could be creativity, could be just talking like this, whatever way. Could be social media, I don't mind. Talk about Jesus and just see what God will do. I think we've got to get better at that. I think we've got to communicate the story into this culture in a brilliant way. And let's all with creativity do that. And you and I present Jesus through our story. The story of my personal faith is the most powerful story to anyone. It's a great way to communicate the gospel. Build a bridge, tell your story, and present the gospel, and then see what God will do.
So finally, your challenge. This time we would like you to pick one model, the one model that resonates with you the most, and practice it. And the next time you have a God conversation with someone, try and use it. Try and explain the good news about Jesus using one of the models that we've suggested today. And let us know next time how you get on.